A self-made billionaire once said that every person has a price. He built his fortune believing that. Then he walked into a small-town bakery in rural Ontario, ordered a black coffee, and met the one woman who made him question everything he thought he knew. Oliver Reeves had been awake since 4 in the morning. That wasn't unusual. What was unusual was that his driver had taken a wrong turn off the 400. Somewhere past Barrie, the GPS had lost signal in a patch of dead zone between two hills, and his scheduled breakfast meeting in Collingwood was now 40 minutes away with no highway in sight. Just a 2-lane road, dense pine forest on both sides, and a faded wooden sign that read Hartwell, population 1200. "Pull over there," Oliver said, pointing at the only lit window on what appeared to be the town's main street. The sign above the door said Sullivan's, hand-painted, the kind of place that hadn't updated its branding since the 90s and didn't intend to. Inside, it smelled like brown butter and cardamom. 3 tables, a long counter, a chalkboard menu with half the specials crossed out. A woman stood behind the counter with her back to him, sliding a tray of something into the oven. She wore a plain white apron, dark hair pulled back, flour on her left elbow. "We don't open for another 10 minutes, she said, without turning around. Oliver checked his Rolex, 6:52. "I just need a coffee. Machine still warming up." He looked around. No other customers. No one at the tables. He sat down anyway at the counter and set his phone face down because there was still no signal, and looking at a dead screen felt humiliating. The woman turned around. She wasn't what he expected. Not that he'd formed a precise expectation in the 10 seconds he'd been standing there. But she looked at him the way people in small towns sometimes look at strangers. Not with hostility, just a flat, unhurried assessment, the kind that has nowhere else to be. "You're lost," she said. "I'm redirected." Something moved at the corner of her mouth. Not quite a smile. "Coffee'll be ready in 5 minutes. There's water on the counter." He didn't touch the water. He watched her work instead, because there was nothing else to do, and because she moved with the kind of quiet efficiency that was actually interesting to watch. She portioned dough by feel, not measurement. She knew exactly where every tool was without looking. She'd done this 10,000 times. "Do you own this place?" he asked. "My grandmother did." "That's not what I asked." She looked at him again. "Yes, I own it. How long?" 3 years. "And before that?" She set down the dough cutter. "Do you always interview people before you've introduced yourself?" He almost said something dismissive. Instead he said, "Oliver Reeves." She wiped her hand on the apron and didn't extend it. "Nora Sullivan." The coffee machine beeped. She poured without asking how he took it, which meant black, which was correct, and set it in front of him. He drank it. It was genuinely excellent coffee. "Where were you headed?" Nora asked. "Collingwood. Meeting. You're about 25 minutes out, if you stay on County Road 19. Don't go back to the highway. You know the roads. I've lived here my whole life." He looked at her for a moment. There was something careful in the way she answered questions. Precise, no extra words. Nothing offered that hadn't been asked for. He was used to people who gave him more than he asked for. More enthusiasm, more information, more deference. It was almost disorienting, the absence of it. "I'll pay for the coffee in the 10 minutes before you opened," he said, pulling out his wallet. "It's $2.75. He put a 50 on the counter. She opened the register and counted out his change and set it in front of him. Exact change. $47.25. Oliver looked at the pile of bills and coins and then at her. "I didn't ask for change. I didn't ask you to leave a tip." He stood there a second longer than was necessary, then picked up the change, left a 5, and walked out. In the car, his driver didn't say anything. Oliver looked out the window at the bakery as they pulled away. Through the glass, he could see Nora Sullivan already moving again. Back to her trays, back to her work, as if he'd never been there at all. He was in Collingwood by 7:30. The meeting went well. He closed a deal on a 40-acre waterfront development and shook 3 hands and 8 eggs he didn't taste. On the drive back to Toronto, without meaning to, he asked his driver to go back through Hartwell. Sullivan's was busy now. 4 of the 5 tables full, a small line at the counter. Nora moved between the espresso machine and the display case, without rushing, taking orders, making change, answering a question from an older man who seemed to be a regular, laughing at something he said. A real laugh, unguarded, nothing like the careful flatness from that morning. Oliver didn't stop. He told his driver to keep going, but he came back the following Thursday, and the Thursday after that. By the third visit, she stopped looking surprised to see him. By the fourth, she had his coffee ready when he walked in. "You could just install a better espresso machine in your office," she said, setting the cup in front of him. "I have 3 of them. Then, what are you doing in Hartwell?" He didn't answer. She didn't press. What he was doing in Hartwell, though he would not have said this out loud, was thinking more clearly than he had in years. There was something about the 40-minute drive through the pine corridor north of Barry, the dead zone where his phone went quiet, the 20 minutes at the counter where no one wanted anything from him except $2.75 for a coffee. It reset something. He didn't know what to call it. He was not a man who spent much time examining what things were called. On his 6th visit, there were no seats at the counter. A young couple had taken the last 2 stools. Oliver stood near the door, which he was not accustomed to doing anywhere, and waited. Nora glanced at him. Then she said something to a teenage girl who was washing cups near the back, and the girl disappeared through a side door and came back with a stool that must have been stored in the kitchen. "Counter's full," Nora said, setting the stool at the far end. "But there's room here if you don't mind being in the way." He sat in the way. They talked, in pieces, the way conversations happen at a bakery counter. She'd answer a question, then disappear to pull something from the oven, then come back. He learned she'd studied economics at the University of Guelph, come back to Hartwell when her grandmother's health declined, and never left. He learned she made the cardamom rolls herself, from a recipe her grandmother had brought from somewhere she never specified. He learned she had one employee, the teenage girl, whose name was Becca, and who was saving for university. He learned almost nothing personal. Every time the conversation moved towards something interior, something that might have required her to show more than the surface, she redirected it with a question about him, or a practical observation, or a small task that suddenly needed doing. He recognized the technique. He used it himself. On his 8th visit, he arrived to find the front door propped open and Nora on a ladder outside, painting over a water-damaged section of the sign above the door. The letter S in Sullivan's had gone gray. "You should hire someone for that," he said. "I am someone," she said, without looking down. "I meant a professional. I painted this sign with my grandmother when I was 9. I think I can manage a touch-up." He stood on the sidewalk, hands in his pockets, watching her work. The morning was cool and clear, the kind of October morning that felt like a gift before the weather turned for good. "Nora, have dinner with me." She kept painting. Didn't miss a stroke. "No thank you," she said. "Why not?" She came down from the ladder, wiped the brush on a cloth, and looked at him with the same unhurried assessment as the first morning. "Because you're going to be back in Toronto by noon, and dinner is in the evening. And I have an early start, Saturday," he said. "I'll come Saturday. You always have somewhere to be on Saturday. I'll clear it." She looked at him for a moment. "Oliver, why would you drive an hour and a half to have dinner in a town with 2 restaurants? Because that's where you are." Something shifted in her expression, not softening exactly, more like a door that had been fully closed moving an inch. Then she picked up the ladder and carried it inside. He waited. She came back to the doorway. "The Italian place on Maple closes at 9. Don't be late." He was not late. Dinner was strange and good. She'd changed out of the apron into something simple, dark jeans and a gray sweater, and she looked like herself in a way that some people don't manage when they dress up. They talked for 3 hours. About economics, about development patterns in small towns, about what happened to places like Hartwell when the highway bypassed them. She had opinions that were specific and well-reasoned, and she didn't soften them when she sensed he disagreed. At one point he said, "You're more interesting than anyone I've had dinner with in the last 2 years. That says more about your dinner companions than about me," she said. When the restaurant closed and they stood on the sidewalk in the cold, he said, "I want to see you again. You already see me every Thursday. I mean like this." She looked at the streetlight for a moment, then at him. "What are you actually looking for, Oliver?" The question landed like something physical. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "You come here every week," she said, not unkindly. "You leave tips I don't ask for. You just sat across from me for 3 hours. But I don't know what you think this is." "I don't know either," he said. "That's why I want to keep finding out." She was quiet for long enough that he thought she was going to say no. "Okay," she said. "But I need you to know something. I'm not interested in being an interesting detour." "I know, I mean it, so do I." She nodded, once, and that was that. They saw each other most weekends through November. Oliver started arriving on Saturdays mid-morning and staying until late afternoon, sitting at the counter while the last customers filtered out, helping Nora close up in ways that were more observed than useful. He didn't know where things were. She moved around him like he was a piece of furniture that had been placed in an inconvenient spot but that she'd decided to keep anyway. He told her about his company, Reeves Capital, about the development projects, about the Toronto office, and the two he kept in Calgary and Vancouver. She listened carefully and asked good questions, and once, when he described a deal he was proud of that had displaced a small family-run manufacturing plant, she said simply, "Was there another way to structure it?" He'd said no at the time, quickly, the way he always had when anyone questioned a decision. But on the drive back to the city he thought about it for 40 minutes and didn't have a clean answer. He was not used to being without clean answers. His assistant, a sharp, efficient woman named Patricia, who had worked for him for 6 years, noticed the change in his schedule before she said anything. Then one Tuesday she said, "Your Thursday and Saturday mornings have been blocked for personal travel for 2 months. "Yes," Oliver said. "Hartwell," she said. "Yes." She waited. He didn't explain. She didn't ask. In December, Oliver's older sister Claire flew in from Vancouver for a board meeting and took him to dinner at a place in the financial district where the tables were too close together and the wine list was 3 pages. She was 41, direct, the only person in Oliver's professional life who said exactly what she thought to him. "Patricia says you've been driving to a town north of Barrie every week," Claire said. "Patricia talks too much. Patricia is loyal, and I asked her directly." "Who is she?" "A baker." Claire set down her fork. "She owns a bakery," Oliver said, "in Hartwell." "It was her grandmother's, a baker," Claire repeated. "You've been driving 3 hours round trip every week for 2 months to see a baker. The coffee is very good." Claire looked at him for a long moment. Then she picked up her fork again. "Is she kind?" The question surprised him. "Yes. Does she tell you when you're wrong?" "Regularly." "Good," Claire said. "Bring her to Christmas." "We're not there yet." "Then get there." What Oliver didn't tell Claire, what he hadn't told anyone because there was no one he talked to about things like this, was that something about Nora Sullivan unsettled him in a way he couldn't map. It wasn't attraction, or not only that. It was something more specific, a feeling that she was making room for him without making allowances for him, and that those were different things. He had spent his adult life around people who made allowances, who adjusted what they said based on what he seemed to want to hear. He had not realized how tired he was of it until it stopped. He was in Vancouver the first week of January for a project review when Patricia sent him a message flagging a local news item out of Simcoe County. A development company had filed a rezoning application for Hartwell's main commercial block. The application listed several properties. One of them was the building at 14 Maple Street. Sullivan's Oliver read the filing twice. Then he called his head of acquisitions. "Collingwood-Barrie Corridor," he said. "Hartwell. What do you know?" "We've been watching it for about 18 months, his acquisitions director said. "Strong case for mixed-use conversion. The main street has good bones, but most of the tenants are month-to-month. The anchor property is a bakery. The owner has a lease through April, but the building itself sold 6 months ago to a numbered company out of Mississauga. The rezoning application went in last week." Oliver's chest felt strange. "Who owns the numbered company?" A pause. "Do you want me to dig on that?" "Yes. Now." He knew before the call came back. He knew the way you know something you've been avoiding knowing. The numbered company was a subsidiary of a holding group that had completed 3 similar conversions in southern Ontario in the past 4 years. The principal was a man named Gordon Reeves, Oliver's father. He sat in his Vancouver hotel room for a long time without moving. His father had retired from the family business 8 years ago, or said he had. In practice, Gordon Reeves moved money through structures that kept his name off the letterhead while his hands stayed on the mechanism. Oliver knew this the way he knew many things about his father, factually, with a layer of deliberate not looking at. He flew back to Toronto that night. He did not call Nora. He went to see his father on Wednesday morning, to the house in Rosedale that Gordon Reeves had lived in for 30 years. His father was in his study, looking at something on a tablet, and looked up when Oliver came in with the expression of a man who expected everyone to wait for him, and mostly wasn't wrong. The Hartwell application, Oliver said. His father set down the tablet. How did you find it? How long have you known about the bakery? Gordon Reeves looked at his son with the flat patience of a man who had handled many difficult conversations and considered them primarily logistical problems. About 4 months, when it became clear you were making a habit of driving up there. The blood in Oliver's ears went very quiet. You're doing this because of me. I'm doing this because it's a sound investment. You had your people buy the building out from under her without telling me. It's a commercial transaction, Oliver. It has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with me, and you know that. His father was quiet for a moment. Then, she's a baker in a town of 1,200 people. Whatever you think is happening there, it's not your call. You're 41 years old and you're driving to Hartwell every week, like a man who's lost his direction. I'm protecting the company's interests. By evicting a woman from a business her family built for 3 generations. By developing an underutilized commercial property in a growth corridor. Oliver looked at his father, at the careful stillness of him, the way he arranged everything to be true without being honest. He had spent a long time trying not to see his father clearly because it made other things too difficult. Now he saw him very clearly. Stop the application, Oliver said. I won't. Then I'll buy the building. His father smiled. Not warmly. You'd pay above market to rescue a bakery? I'd pay what it takes. She won't thank you for it, Gordon said. Women like that don't want to be rescued. It makes them feel small. Oliver picked up his coat from the chair. You've never in your life understood what anyone else wanted. That was always the problem. He left without waiting for an answer. He called Patricia from the car. Find out what the building at 14 Maple Street in Hartwell sold for 6 months ago. Then find out who I have to talk to at that numbered company to put a competing offer in. Are you buying a building in Hartwell? Patricia asked. I'm buying back a mistake. It took 4 days and more money than was rational and a direct conversation with 2 lawyers, but Oliver bought the building. He structured it so Nora's lease would be extended, automatically, for 10 years at the existing rate. Then he drove to Hartwell on Saturday. Sullivan's was open. There was a small lineup at the counter. Becca was working the till. Nora was in the back, visible through the pass-through window, doing something with a standing mixer. Oliver waited until the lineup cleared, then sat at the counter. Nora came out from the back with flour on her sleeve and stopped when she saw him. You haven't been here in 2 weeks, she said. I know. I'm sorry. She looked at him for a moment, then poured his coffee and set it down. You look like something happened. Something did, he told her. All of it. The development application, his father, the numbered company, the building changing hands. He watched her face move through things he couldn't fully name. Surprise, then something careful, then a kind of stillness that was worse than anger. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. You bought my building, she said. Yes, without asking me. He had anticipated this. I know. Oliver. Her voice was very even. I've been afraid of losing this place for 2 months. Every week you came in here I didn't tell you, because I didn't want to involve you, because this is my problem and I handle my own problems. And the whole time your family was the reason I was afraid. I know. And you fixed it by buying the building, which is exactly the kind of solution that makes sense when you have the money and none of it when you don't. I know that too. So what do you want me to say? He set down the coffee cup. I don't want you to say anything. I wanted you to know what happened and what I did about it. I'm not asking you to be grateful. Then what are you asking? Nothing, he said. I'm not asking anything. She looked at him. The bakery was quiet. Becca had discreetly gone to the back. You could have called me, Nora said. When you found out. I know. I should have. I was trying to fix it before I had to tell you, which was the wrong instinct. Yes, it was. She picked up a cloth and set it down again, a small motion, the kind people make when they're working out what to say. Does your father know why you did it? He thinks I'm making a mistake. What do you think? Oliver looked at her. I think I've been making a lot of those, and I think this wasn't one of them. A long moment. The lease, Nora said. 10 years at current rate. That's a real thing. That's not nothing. No. It's not nothing. I can't pay you back. I'm not asking you to. She looked out the window at Maple Street, at the hand-painted sign above the door, the letter S newly bright, where she'd touched it up in October. Then she looked back at him. You should have called me, she said again. Yes, don't do that again. Don't go around me. I won't, she nodded. Then she picked up the coffee pot and refilled his cup even though it wasn't empty. It was, he understood, an act of extraordinary forgiveness. What Oliver didn't know, what he had no way of knowing yet, was that the conversation he'd had with his father in the Rosedale study had not ended the way he thought it had. Gordon Reeves had made a call on Wednesday afternoon, not long after Oliver left. He'd called a contact of his, a journalist who wrote for a financial publication that Oliver's investors read. The call was brief, and the information passed was technically accurate and precisely calibrated. That Oliver Reeves had paid significantly above market value for a commercial property in rural Ontario with no development potential, and that he had done so for personal reasons connected to a woman he'd been seeing. The story ran on a Tuesday. It framed itself as a question about judgment. It quoted unnamed board members. It included a photo of Sullivan's storefront that had been lifted from the bakery's social media, the kind of small, low-quality image that looks slightly absurd next to the financial figures being discussed. Oliver's phone started at 7 in the morning. By 9, 3 board members had called Patricia asking for a conversation. By noon, his largest institutional investor had sent a formal inquiry letter. He was in the middle of drafting a response when Nora called. "I've seen the article," she said. "Nora, my phone has been ringing since 8 o'clock. 2 journalists, a food blogger who seems confused about what kind of story this is, and someone from the Collingwood newspaper. Becca is very excited. I am not. I'm sorry. Is it your father?" "I think so. I'm looking into it." "A beat. What are you going to do?" "Address my board. Make a statement. Probably have a very unpleasant conversations. About the building? About my father's business practices generally. This has been building for a long time. He gave me an opening I should probably use." She was quiet for a moment. "Oliver, yes, I need you to hear something. I'm listening. I don't need you to protect me from the press. I've been running a business by myself in a small town for 3 years. People talk. I can handle people talking. I know, but I can't be collateral in a family conflict I didn't know I was part of. If this is going to keep happening, it won't. You can't promise that." "I can promise that I'm going to deal with it," he said. "Not around you. With you, if you want to be included in how I handle this." A pause. "I think you should come Saturday." "Yes, and I think we need to have a different kind of conversation than the ones we've been having." He understood what she meant. "Yes, we do." He faced his board on Thursday. He was direct in a way he had not always been, which was uncomfortable and also clarifying. He explained the acquisition, the reasoning, the family connection. He did not apologize for the decision, but he acknowledged that the communication had been poor and that he intended to address the structural issues with the Reeves family holdings that had allowed this kind of interference to happen. Claire called him afterward. "That went better than it could have. Not great, no, but honest." A pause. "Dad called me, and I told him what I thought, which was long overdue." Oliver was quiet for a moment. "He did the same thing to Daniel," he said. Before Daniel left, the name sat between them on the line. Their younger brother Daniel had walked away from the family company 9 years ago. After a conflict with their father over a project that had crossed a line Daniel wasn't willing to cross. He'd moved to the East Coast and rebuilt something quieter, and had not spoken to Gordon in years. Oliver had stayed. He had always told himself it was to manage things from the inside, to be a moderating presence. Sitting in the boardroom on Thursday, he had wondered for the first time whether that was entirely true. "Call him," Claire said. "Daniel. It's been too long." He drove to Hartwell on Saturday morning through the first real snowfall of the year. The highway was clear, but the county road was soft, and the pines on either side of 19 looked different under the snow, heavier, quieter. His phone went silent in the dead zone. He didn't find it unsettling anymore. Sullivan's was warm and smelled like cinnamon. Becca was at the counter, looking at him with the particular expression of a teenager who has been following a situation and has opinions she's keeping to herself. He sat at the counter. She poured his coffee without being asked. Nora came out from the back. She sat down on the stool across the counter that she only ever sat on when the bakery was empty. It was not empty. "Do you want to go for a walk?" she said. They walked along the main street and then down toward the small river that ran behind the town, through a park that was mostly used by dogs and their owners. The snow was still coming down, light and dry. "Tell me about Daniel," Nora said. He looked at her sideways. The article mentioned a brother, she said. You don't talk about him. We don't talk much. My father. He stopped. Started again. There was a project. 9 years ago, development in New Brunswick. The environmental assessment had been, my father's people had found ways to make it say what they needed it to say. Daniel found out. He told my father he wouldn't sign off on it. What happened? My father told him that was how the industry worked and that he needed to decide what kind of businessman he wanted to be. Oliver paused. Daniel decided, and left, and you stayed. And I stayed. Nora was quiet for a moment, watching the river. A dog ran past them with a stick, and its owner apologized automatically without breaking stride. Did you agree with what Daniel did? She asked. I agreed with his reasoning. That's not what I asked. He looked at the river. Yes, I agreed with what he did. But you didn't do it. No. She didn't say anything. I told myself it was more useful to stay, he said, that I could change more from inside than Daniel could from outside. That was partly true and partly comfortable. Do you still believe it? Less than I did. She turned and looked at him directly. In the winter light, in the snow, she looked very clear, very present. Oliver, why did you really keep coming back here? I already told you, You told me what? She said. Not why. He was quiet for a long time. The snow kept coming down. Because when I'm here, I'm not performing anything, he said. I'm not the CEO. I'm not Gordon Reeves's son. I'm not managing anyone's perception of me. I'm just a person sitting at a counter, drinking very good coffee. He paused. I didn't realize how much of my life is performance until I had 2 hours a week that weren't. She looked at him for a moment. Then she said, You know that can't just be my job. I know, the not performing part. That has to come from you. I can't be the place where you go to stop pretending. I know that. He turned toward her. I'm not asking you to be. I'm trying to figure out how to stop pretending everywhere. Not just on Thursdays. She studied him. What does that actually look like? I don't fully know yet. But I called Daniel this week. For the first time in 3 years. Something in her face shifted, just slightly. How did that go? Difficult, good. He exhaled. He said the same thing you just did, that staying and managing from inside was a story I told myself. He wasn't unkind about it. Is he coming back? No. But we're going to talk again. Next week. Nora looked back at the river. And your father? I'm restructuring the holdings. Separating his interests from Reeves Capital formally. It should have happened years ago. It's going to be a fight. He paused. I'm prepared for that. She nodded slowly. Nora, he said. I'm in love with you. I don't know when that happened exactly, but I know it's true, and I'm not very good at not saying true things once I know them. She was quiet for long enough that the snow had time to settle on her shoulders. I know, she said finally. Is that all you're going to say? She looked at him. No. I'm also going to say that I'm in love with you too, and that I find it deeply inconvenient. He laughed, which surprised him. Why inconvenient? Because you live in Toronto, because your life is complicated. Because I have a bakery to open at 6 every morning, and I'm going to keep doing that, whether or not a billionaire is in love with me. I'm aware, and because, she said, more quietly, I was doing fine before you walked in here in October. I had a plan. My lease was secure, or I thought it was. Becca was doing well, the business was stable. And then you showed up and turned everything sideways. I know, I'm not blaming you. I just want you to understand what you walked into. I'm not a detour. I told you that. You're not a detour. Then what am I? The part I'm building toward, he said. If you'll let me. She looked at him for a long moment. The dog with the stick ran back the other way. You should know something, Nora said. Tell me. Your father's people contacted me. In October, before you knew about the application. Someone called the bakery and offered to buy me out. Not the building, me, the business. They said the building's new owner was planning to renovate and I could either take the offer or wait and see what my options were. Oliver went very still. What did you do? I said no. Why? Because my grandmother built that kitchen and I'm not selling it to a numbered company from Mississauga. She paused. And because I'd already decided I wasn't going to let fear make my decisions, he looked at her. You never told me you were afraid. I said I was handling it. You were carrying it by yourself. That's what I do. She met his eyes. It's also what you do. We've both been very good at handling things alone. Maybe that's something we could get worse at together. He reached out and took her hand. She let him. They stood by the river for a while, not saying much. The snow fell on the pines and the frozen river grass in the town of 1200 that had not updated its main street sign since the 90s and did not intend to. Eventually Nora said, "You should come for Christmas. You told me to bring myself." "I am bringing myself," he said. "That's what I've been trying to do." She squeezed his hand. Then she turned back toward Maple Street. "Come on. Becca's alone with the Saturday crowd and she's going to sell someone the last cardamom roll, and I'll never hear the end of it." He walked back with her through the snow, past the hand-painted sign, through the door that had been propped open 6 weeks ago when she was on a ladder being entirely competent without his help. He sat at the counter. She went back to work, and it was, without ceremony or announcement, the first morning of something real.